Welcome to the SSI Orbit Podcast, a forum that explores everything pertinent to digital trust. And I'm your host, Mathieu Glaude. So you've been in the space for some years. I think probably longer than a lot of people that are in the digital identity or self-sovereign identity space today. So it would be interesting to hear your perspective on maybe how things have evolved over time. Like there's been a lot of evolution on the standards, on the technologies, on the governance frameworks, and more adoption happening of digital wallets and digital credentials and different flavors of all of these things. It'd be interesting to hear just from your perspective how things have evolved, but also just from I guess everyone that was early in the space had big visions of self-sovereignty and decentralization and all these things, and then kind of looking at where we're at today and where we're going at today with the adoption and with government wallets and with Apple and Google wallets, and just to kind of think about how things have evolved over time. Do you think we've lost a bit of that visionary stuff with where it's going? And I know this is a big question and could basically just talk about this for a full hour, but maybe that's a good starting point to get a sense from your side, who's been in the space so long, of how things have kind of changed in your perception.
Yeah, I think this is quite a big question, and so the answer is probably going to be quite long with a lot of, let's say, sub questions and so on. Yeah, so I've been introduced to the space like mid 2017, and I started working with Evernym as a product manager for their enterprise products. So I was hired for that, and my background is product management. So I was kind of focused on building products for users and for them, trying to actually find or to build capabilities that answer to some kind of market needs. And and when you're working with this type of technology, it's not as easy because you cannot clearly identify the market needs, or you can identify the market needs, but you cannot really build something easily that it would immediately solve some pain points and so on. Or let's say the pain points are quite are not easy to solve, and so on. And there are a lot of things that need to happen in order to have, let's say, a viable solution or viable answer to that. And if you ask me like what has changed since 2017 until now, I would say, let's say, a lot of things has changed, but also not much has changed at the same time. And why do I say that? Because so when you look at what has really changed, and I think right now SSI is really becoming, or the whole kind of decentralized identity domain is becoming almost like a mainstream digital identity technology. So currently, you don't see people discussing digital identity implementations for national scale digital identity or something similar that doesn't involve the verifiable credentials technologies and so on. So I think this is really the good thing. And now, we've always known that the whole kind of SSI community is a relatively small community, and you get to see and meet almost the same people on all these different events throughout the year. But at the same time, you have also so many new people, and so many new companies are now embarked on this journey. Also, like, you see so many new faces, preaching the values of SSI and decentralized identity. I think this is something that's really it is somehow making me proud, that I used to be part of that, like some time ago when the community was so much smaller, and now that I see like completely let's say unknown people that are kind of doing this, and they're maybe doing the job maybe even better than what we were doing and so on. So I think this is really good. Also, when you look at the technical side, what has changed, of course, we have now new credential formats, new protocols for credential exchange. You have the SD-JOT that are kind of, hit the spotlight, the MDoc credential format. Of course, the OpenID for VC and so on. You also have some other credential formats that are somehow losing, that spotlight, like AnonCreds. It's somehow losing that type of. It's not as attractive as it used to be. You have, these big regulatory push or government push initiatives like EIDAS, V2 in Europe, and I think there are lots of hopes for that. What's going to happen? You have also like big companies from the kind of a classic PKI world, digital identity technology, that are now in the space and that are kind of adopting the verifiable credential technology, either through acquisitions or through some kind of partnerships, or also by doing some kind of in-house development and so on. So all these things are kind of quite positive, and you see a lot of changes on that side. And then why I say also that not much has changed is that like my own kind of personal perception from 2017 was that we at Evernym at the time, we had this kind of belief or impression that 2 to 3 years from that moment, from now, the market is gonna go up and it's gonna explode, right? And I still have the same feeling, or I still have the feeling that 2 to 3 years from now, the market is going to go up. I'm not sure if it's going to explode, but there's definitely an expectation that, because of some of these initiatives like IIDAS V2, that we're actually going to see some kind of significant adoption on the market, and that we're going to see some, credentials in the wild being exchanged, by, people and so on. So I think that part hasn't changed. Also, like there is still a lot of fragmentation in the space. Like before, I think before we had several credential formats, but I think before the main kind of discussion was, hey, like should we use the W3C JSON LD credential format, like it's W3C recommendation, it's kind of on some kind of a standard track, or you have this kind of AnonCreds, which is opinionated, but it works. You have kind of more or less mature implementations and so on. So there was a lot of discussions between W3C, JSON LD, and AnonCred format. Nowadays, I think we are more or less in the same boat, but now I think the discussion is, there's like SD-JOT, there's the MDoc, how to combine the two. Should we combine the two? We also have like the W3C as well, and so on. So there is definitely still a lot of fragmentation, and so we are kind of yet to see how, some of these initiatives like EIDAS is gonna help streamline that into something that's usable, interoperable, and so on.
Do you feel like there's too much focus on government initiatives today? Like it feels like it's sucking up a lot of the air, and EIDAS too, for sure. Even is you're hearing about it globally, and I've talked about it many times on this podcast as well. But do you think there's too much focus on government wallets? Do you think we've lost a bit of the vision for self-sovereignty? Because it feels like just existing players are just going to be using this new mechanism to issue a verifiable credential or a digital credential into a government wallet or a government approved or auditor approved wallet. Like it seems sometimes like it's just a very not a massive transformation of kind of some of the things that we imagine could be transformed. It's just new tools that will have benefits to them, but at the same time, like restrictions are tight, governance is tight. So do you feel like there's too much focus on that, and that maybe we've lost a bit of the larger vision of self sovereignty?
I would say yes. There's definitely a lot of focus on the government initiatives, um, and it seems like a lot of these other initiatives that are maybe happening in some kind of ecosystems, like there's kind of initiative from in the airline industry about seamless passenger travel and so on, that are happening at the same time or in parallel with these government initiatives. But it seems to me that there's there is this kind of a waiting that once this is being approved or provided by the government, then this will actually jumpstart the whole ecosystem slash adoption. It seems to be that like everyone seems to kind of wait for this to happen so they can leverage or piggyback on those initiatives and so on. And I don't know if this is the right thing to do, or this is how to say some kind of justification for not seeing something tangible in the meantime, because I don't think all the use cases do require government-backed digital identity, and there are also some other use cases that don't require that. And I'm sure that there are many use cases from kind of the private sector where this technology can be used to solve a real problem, will be applied in some kind of a real world use case. But yeah, I'm not sure. It seems to me that the value of the main value of the technology is when you have different type of organizations that are somehow loosely coupled, or they have some kind of interest to work together, right? So if you have that type of a association in some kind of a sector within, or like national or international, then you can clearly provide some kind of or define the values that this technology can do for a specific use case. And then like, why is this not happening? I'm not really sure. So I don't know like if there are different types of associations that should be pushing for this type of agenda, and so on. For example, in the supply chain, like should we have some kind of association to push for like traceability in the supply chains and so on, where verifiable credentials could be an answer to that, and why we don't see that earlier. I'm, I'm saying like I'm not sure. And taking that the supply chain example, or this traceability initiative that is being now pushed, it's also pushed by European Union. It's also pushed by this the need to have digital product passports for batteries, the need to have traceability in the circular economy and so on, and then it's also kind of a regulatory push from some of these kind of international bodies and so on. Also, like you also mentioned about the wallets. Like you have the government provided wallets. There's also OEM or OS provided wallets from Apple and Google and so on. I think it's also going to be interesting how those things will develop there, and what type of wallet will actually kind of prevail and get really adopted. I know that the European Union is like really sensitive and wants to stay in control, so that's why they are pushing for this EUD wallet. And EUD wallet, at least the good thing about the EUD wallet is that okay, you have a lot of it's going to be controlled. It's going to be kind of attested by the European Union. We're going to have a lot of use cases supported. At least the ambition is to have a lot of use cases supported by the wallet. And then on the other side, you have this massive distribution channel from Apple and Google that's already kind of there, and adding um, additional use cases to their wallets. It's going to be, there's clearly going to be an advantage for those kind of big tech providers to add these additional use cases there. Uh, what's going to prevail? Who's going to win in that type of I don't want to say battle, but in that type of competition, we're yet to see.
Yeah, it's interesting to see kind of the overlapping then that starts to happen between public sector initiatives and then just like the general web or the internet, right? Because like at least today, like we still use usernames and passwords for most things. There's been obviously like a lot of multi-factor authentication enhancements that kind of add some security and so forth, but it's still usernames and passwords. Has a lot of security vulnerabilities, but at the same time, they're usually not centrally controlled. Like there are federated models and stuff like that, but it's somewhat distributed. And so I wonder like if everything is moving, if at least like the high integrity government issued identity documents which are coming from the right government authorities are landing inside of the Apple wallets, Google wallets, and the government wallets. If you start to see there starts to be like more centralization in the tool that is being used for authentication. I wonder how adoption starts, because you would imagine a lot of relying parties will just start saying, "Hey, like this is a cheap way for me to do an identity verification or have someone authenticate and log in." So it starts to it's almost like a re-centralization of things in some aspects.
I mean, yes, and I think it's also like you know, okay, like when you look at the main use case for the OIM wallet right now today is the payment, right? And okay, you can also store these, like boarding passes and so on, but you're not flying every day, but you pay like few times a day, right? So this is like the most common use cases that you use on a daily basis. And then when you also look at the user experience, it's like quite slick, seamlessly. You just do Face ID and then tap, and then there you go, or double click or whatever. So it's so the the user experience is so optimized to get this one job done as quickly as possible and as convenient as possible. And that's why it's so successful, right? That's why it's really so successful. That's why I'm not, using another type of, or most of the users are not using another type of, how to say, payment application or payment wallet because they need to open the, application. They need to go in and so on. And here you don't need to do that, right? You can even pay when your phone is locked. So it's I'm curious to see like how, because the identity use cases they're I think they're a little bit more complex, and you need to also kind of provide more context, or at least that was the assumption that that you need to provide more context, like what you're sharing, what type of information with who, and so on. And therefore it's interesting to see how the user experience is going to be for Google and Apple and these kind of big OEM providers when it comes to identity use cases. And for sure, they will, we see that they will not leave that market, for someone else. So and we already see that they have started supporting some of the MDLs in some of the states in the US. So we can expect to see more of that coming from these types of wallets, and we can expect that they will also not just lead the whole kind of European market, just like that. But I'm also curious to see, what the user experience is going to be for kind of identity-related transactions and so on, and see how that can, how will that, put them or compare them with, some of these government provided wallets.
That's an interesting point you made about just the complexity of that exchange or interaction. Because you're right. If you want to share a boarding pass, it's literally just you pull up your boarding pass and you put it to a scanner, and there's no business logic. There's no choice. It's just like a simple thing. And same thing if you use tap to pay. It's kind of like you're in proximity. You trust, and it's actually incredible how much trust is built into just the pay to tap. Like no one even asks themselves any questions there. But you're right. In the identity use case, you wonder like if the intent of the relying party needs to be passed across to the holder, or to the identity holder, if they need to be given choice, how that interaction does look like, or if it's just like the majority of our interactions are still just going to be, there's not much complexity to it, because you don't want to put that complexity on end users, and end users are just gonna, to do a tap or do a simple scan, and it's just like a one step thing. I don't know how that evolves.
Yeah, So that's something. Yeah, I'm really interested to see, because like over the past few years, we've done, or I've been part in several kind of POCs, pilots, seen some kind of user testing results and so on. And everywhere you see that there's a lot of context that you actually surface to the user, right? You provide a lot of information. You need to somehow to convey the trust. You need somehow to put some kind of green check mark somewhere. You need to display like what is the party, where is the coming of the data, the information that you're sharing. And then if you're kind of if you use some of these selective disclosures coming from multiple sources, like from multiple credentials, and you want to display all of that, I mean, like what actually we are, how will that affect the kind of the normal, when I say the normal user, the one who is completely uninterested in the identity, in all of that, who just wants to get his stuff done, so he can, I don't know, access the bank, or file the taxes, or file for like a credit loan or something like that. Like whoever just wants to do his own stuff, like and then providing all of this information and all the context, like what it will actually do for to the user, and how will they actually react, how much. I'm actually going to like be really curious to see what would be kind of the actual success, or how many people or users will drop out in the whole flow, when you do something that's as complex as that.
It also puts a lot of dependency on the wallet providers, and like if the wallet providers are the mobile phone, the OEMs, and they're the governments, like you're kind of restricted to what they're able to provide to you as well, right? Like if it's any third party building custom applications, and like based on whatever, but in this case we're literally just talking about which would seem to be very simple utilities, simple wallets. And I wonder if there's going to be stuff that different relying parties, or like organizations or whoever wants to interact with a wallet provider would maybe be limited by what they could do, because you're stuck to you're stuck to the government wallet. Maybe let's jump to products. It's funny seeing, I guess, the evolution and the products still today in the space. Like when people are, or organizations are building digital wallet products, either for people or for organizations, or even like credential management and exchange platforms to facilitate credential management, to facilitate the issuance of credentials, to facilitate consuming credentials for relying parties. It all seems to be very technically focused, and a lot of them kind of look the same. And I think at Evernym, you probably had the first platform that did this type of thing, but I don't know if we've seen that much advancement in that product or those visions since those Evernym products that you had built, which allowed for all these things to happen. Um, because the space is very technical in nature, and a lot of us are very, very involved in depth with technical stuff, that maybe sometimes results into products having maybe too much of a technical lens. But what's your thinking on the evolution of that since you joined the space, where we're at today, and maybe where some of the opportunities are for the community?
Yeah, I think your kind of assessment is quite correct. There hasn't been, when you look at the let's say the first and maybe some of the latest companies that are focusing on SSI technology, you're right. They are very very kind of verifiable credential centric, and maybe how to say and there hasn't been it's like a lot of advancements in the product vision. So a lot of companies are staying on that level, that we are providing the ability for any type of organization, entity, company to kind of generate, issue, or to request verify credentials. Maybe we also provide some kind of um, um, holder slash cloud wallet capabilities for storing of the credentials and so on. And when you look at the many product offerings, they all seem to follow a very same or similar pattern, right? So we are all kind of building some kind of an agent, or we have been built some kind of an agent that has those three main functions, either the issuer or the holder or the verifier, right? So I think I'm not sure what's the reason. My assumption is that like the having working with this verifiable credentials technology is kind of both as a blessing and a curse. As a blessing because you understand, okay, you can apply this to so many different use cases, and you can think of so many different use cases, and but at the same time, it's hard for you to kind of make a bet on some particular use case or some particular vertical, and then build something that's very kind of specific for that particular vertical. And a lot of the companies that are kind of the technology providers for this technology, for SSI and for decentralized entity, have stayed on that level for a long time, because at the same time you're trying to be as generic as possible to answer to many different needs, and then and that's why you're unable to kind of focus on a particular use case, on a particular vertical, and then build something like that's really kind of tailor made for that. And I believe that in future the companies will have to kind of move, and will have to make some bolder choices, and that they will have to actually think how to build some value added products or services that are on top of the verifiable credentials, these generic verifiable credential technologies. So Yes, definitely. Definitely, this is the this has been kind of the very similar topic for many companies.
Yeah, at least like some learnings. Like we've gone through that same process too of just having platforms that do absolutely everything that you would want to do, but it doesn't do anything particularly well. Too complicated, too technical, and it's kind of been the same thing for. So you said you got in the space in 2017. Since then, like all of this has worked. Um, the technology has been there. There's been advancements, but in the technology since then and in the standards since then, but it still seems like the biggest blockers or reasons why it takes longer to push these things forward have less to do with technology, but more to do with all the other stuff around it. Um, One of the things that's difficult for people to just get into is just the actual issuance of credentials. And so we're spending a lot of time thinking about governments doing that and then just saying, wow, there's going to be a supply of high integrity government issued credentials in the market. And then there should be there should be a lot of demand for that because the relying parties will be able to do some digital transformation and change their processes, cut costs, cut fraud, all of these things, while ensuring they're adhering to data privacy laws. Um, then, and that we've been kind of facing this in the Canadian market as we've seen credentials going to production, where we've seen the path of, okay, relying parties want to consume it and do what I just described, but then they want to start thinking about, hey, how do I issue a credential? And so just thinking about how you componentize that a little bit more on its own to kind of solve that exact problem. That's not like a big SSI credential exchange platform. Like there's a lot more that just goes into issuing a credential. So I'd be interested from your experience in the space and clients you've worked with and such, like how do you look at issuing a credential? It seems like a lot more of a heavy task to do than saying, "Hey, I just want to consume or verify a credential."
Yes, yeah. So yeah, I think this is I mean, it's related to the previous question because all the use cases are so different, and because the issuing for I don't know for a certain credential in the airline aviation sector is so different than I don't know issuing in a let's say health sector or supply chain, for supply chain use cases and so on. I think uh, that's why we are unable to kind of build some kind of specific use case for a certain or build the product offering for a certain use case. And we are, as you say, like issuing requires many different checks to be done, and usually the actual issuing of a verifiable credential comes at the very end. So there's a lot of business logic that happens beforehand. Either some either you need to kind of verify some information, you need to check and so on, and you need to fetch some data from some kind of data store, database, and so on, and then you're how to say ready to issue, right? Then you're ready to issue, and then you also need to make sure what are the what's the environment, what are the circumstances, are you issuing in some kind of a safe through some kind of safe channel and so on. So all these things are very different from use case to use case, and I do believe that the companies who are in this space they won't be able to actually build something that really works well for a use case until they actually how to say make a bet that they want to go for a and build some value proposition for a certain industry and sector. So and maybe I was also thinking now it came back to me what I wanted to say earlier on. What was also difficult for the whole kind of industry and domain that we were in is that also the what was difficult is that also um, uh, many of the industries are not how to say mature enough. to be able to choose a specific industry. So it's not only the blame that there is on the SSI technology providers that we are unable to kind of pick one of the one of the use cases and then build something like that really works well for that use case. It's also that the market wasn't mature enough to actually accept it, right? And that's why if you're building or having a work, building a company, you need to make sure that you have your as steady as possible income. You need to pay the salaries and so on. So you are accepting different types of projects that are that can be like so different and between each other, and that's why you're also like unable to say, okay, I'm just going to build some product that really works well for the health sector or that particular vertical. So it's not only, let's say, the blame that is supposed to be. It's also about the state of the market and how that goes. And also, what I want also to add to that is why I believe that as we get closer to some kind of broader adoption, that the companies that currently have this type of generic verifiable credential decentralized identity technology, that they will actually have to build something on the top and go after a specific industry and sector. Is I've seen some kind of trend, not trend, but I've seen some kind of signs when you look at the government initiatives, when you look at the let's say different large scale pilots within the EU, you see that a lot of these government bodies that have been tasked to actually implement the EU wallet, a lot of them are actually deciding to, at least at this stage, there are a lot of them deciding to actually explore and build these capabilities themselves. And I've seen some, a few examples that, like a government, they have their own. I've seen that example with, for example, with Sweden. I've seen it with Switzerland. I've also seen it in some other places that really governments are, deciding to, have that expertise, maybe just for exploration at first and so on. But I don't see governments actively, seeking some kind of support from vendors to provide them the solutions, right? To provide them the ready to go solutions. And they're somehow deciding, okay, they will build the SD-JOT credential format themselves. They will build some kind of issuer themselves and so on. So I'm not sure how that will actually evolve over time, and will those governments, when they actually start to have real production, will they need to have some kind of professional support, maintenance, and so on, that they may want to seek from some kind of external provider, or will they kind of continue to to have those capabilities built in-house. So I'm not convinced on the long term that this type of value offering will be enough for the long term or for the market.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's interesting if you contrast how they currently use vendors or suppliers for all types of existing identity cards and stuff like that, right? Like governments don't have the printing facilities in-house, and that they outsource a lot of these functions. But it's interesting to see that in the digital representation of these things, it seems like a lot of that infrastructure is sitting with them, or they're at least making use of and contributing back and investing back into the open source so that they could then operate these things themselves. So it's a bit of a different model than, I guess, how they do today with physical identity cards.
Yes, 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 exactly like that. So you see that, you see that exactly you say, like you see that. I think I've seen it also recently. From there was also kind of a someone posted that one of these German bodies, they are having that type of initiative, and of course, like all these everything that's going to be built is going to be, of course, open sourced. So someone will be able to kind of continue building on top of it, and then and so on. And I've seen it also like in Finland and many other places.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the term. It's like digital public good infrastructure or something. Seems to be a popular thing that is growing. So it does make you wonder. Like I guess for organizations building verifiable credential or digital identity products, I guess if you're talking about like even smaller governments, if you go down to like the municipal level and stuff like that, maybe they don't have the knowledge and expertise or want to kind of run and host this themselves, and maybe will want to buy off the shelf. And maybe the same thing's true in the commercial sector. But then maybe if you look at like, you know, if you start looking at the financial sector and the banks and large organizations, it'll be interesting to think if they want to run their infrastructure themselves. Like, how far does the open source get? And uh,
Yeah,
you guys at Evernym back in the day built so many foundational pieces that have continued to be built upon today. So the space wouldn't be where we are today without all the investments that you guys at Evernym had made over those years. But it'll be interesting to see how far the open source components get, where it's almost like you just run a script very easy, you're running your thing, and versus like, do you need to have someone operating it? Do you need to get an enterprise version of something? Um,
yes.
I don't know if there's any precedence to this in other spaces that we could maybe learn from, but I don't know how this is going to evolve.
Yeah, you're right. So that's why I'm really curious to see exactly like how, like if currently some of these different public sector bodies are currently deciding to build many of the things in house, which is completely fine for the stage that they are currently in. It's development, it's still exploration, it's interop, it's validation of use cases and so on. So the current state they are in doesn't require, as you say, operation, doesn't require support, doesn't require maintenance, doesn't require SLA and so on. And then it would be interesting to see, like, when they actually get to the stage, like how will they source all these services that need to come, uh, and and not just having a source code, right? So source code is one thing, but you need to run it, you need to operate it, and so on.
And even within large governments, like there's going to be multiple ministries that are going to be engaging in verifiable credential exchanges in one way or another, kind of how do they get set up as well? Because I guess typically in the governments there's like a team kind of behind the digital transformation or the advancement of the digital identity stuff, but the actual deployment of this, when you start thinking about issuers and who wants to be consuming these things, even within the government, is like so much broader.
Yes, yes, exactly. It usually is like that. It usually is like that. It usually, you see that there's some kind of body that is pushing for the agenda, like the I don't know, some kind of agency for digitalization or something like that. And then when it comes to the actual who is allowed to issue the government backed or government recognized digital ID, then you see, okay, maybe it's the Ministry of Interior, maybe it needs to be following some kind of legislation from, I don't know, Ministry of whatever. and then you see it's much more complex and so on. That is also the reason why this whole government government-backed digital ID is so slow to get adopted, and that's why there have been discussions, various places, and so on, and still we don't have, let's say, significant adoption, and that's why there are such a big and high hopes in AI that like 2026, 2027, like everything's going to change, but we are still to see if that's going to be really the truth.
Yeah, and I wonder if we start looking at adoption curves of different other like systems, whether you're looking at like EDI or just how cloud infrastructure evolved over time. Just I think there's a lot of excitement right now, but it then comes down to like, okay, even if they're, well, you need to then start looking at the adoption of government wallets by citizens, which is going to have its own adoption cycle. And then you need to start looking at the adoption cycle of the consumption of these things. And then the adoption cycle of the issuance of new domain specific credentials. I don't know how quick all of these things are going to move on their own. I guess the only thing that I kind of say is true is that the cloud infrastructure providers are going to continue making money with all of the digitization that continues to happen.
Yeah, that's definitely the safe bet. I'm not sure how the SSI technology providers will benefit in all of that, but the cloud providers, cloud infrastructure, they for sure will.
Yeah, it's interesting because you've seen like strategies of organizations invest in open source or kind of put their classic strategy of putting your arms around an open source project, and then eventually there's demand for that open source, and then the demand has been coming a lot from governments, and then governments are looking to invest and build on top of that, build their own stuff. So there's been a lot of consulting and people getting hired because they have expertise in specific niches or standards or technologies. And then I guess over time there's been development of products and solutions on top of these things, but you wonder, like, when you kind of made reference earlier to the solution providers needing to go into specialties or into verticals at some point. I wonder when the time is where there'll be maybe a recommendation to startups in the space to, or maybe it's happened and that it should be happening today, to say, hey, like probably worth just going deep into a vertical right now. What would you recommend the startup that is, because it's probably a different recommendation today than when Evernym started as a business, and it was just doing a lot of proof of concepts, trying to just make the technology accessible. If you were hired as an advisor for a startup entering the space today, what would be maybe some recommendations you would have for them?
I mean, yeah. First, I mean, I'm generally, let's say, a product guy, so I'm focused on what's really the benefit for the user. So I would really try today to be kind of more bold, and try to actually pick one of the verticals, one of the use cases, one of the niches, and try really to build something there. And the discussion, the value proposition doesn't have to be DADs and VCs, and as you said, like, we are still using so much of that technical jargon. It's really still quite painful if you start most of your presentations explaining the trust triangle between the issuer, holder, and the verifier. So I think it's really, if you're talking about trying to solve something, trying to be successful, I think we need to really go past that. And I think some of the companies they have decided to really focus on a specific thing, and they're either focusing on supply chains or traceability. I think this is this would be kind of a step in a good direction. Of course, also there, things need to kind of align, and the market needs to be also ready to accept that and so on. But yeah, I think right now there's definitely more chances of success if we are kind of going one step above the platform, above the verifiable credentials as a service and so on, and then try to actually build some solution on top. I think that would be a starting point today. As you said, like when we started, it was you had to explain a lot of you had to explain the concepts, and you started with the concepts, and then you also provided the initial implementations, and then these initial implementations you also need to provide a lot of explanations and concepts and so on. So it's and a lot of, let's say, examples, tutorials, a lot of the learning curve for developers to actually get into the domain and start building something useful was quite steep. And then I'm not sure if it really was needed, but maybe we were like so much pure SSI visionary at the time, and really didn't want to kind of accept the reality that okay, the developers they maybe want some other properties or from the product than to have kind of a pure SSI, or to be exposed to kind of a pure SSI vision. But that was the reality back then, and I think today is I think it can be quite different.
Yeah, it still feels like we haven't reached the point where you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. You just kind of sign up or start using a new solution, and it just feels like magic compared to how you would do something today. And I think we've seen that over the past year and a half with around the year and a half with some of these AI based products, even just the chat based ones, where it's kind of like seems like magic compared to something that we either couldn't do before, or we would do something differently. I wonder if it's just the nature of like asynchronous solutions or products where there is reliance on multiple interactions with multiple parties, and you do need to get some sort of network effect for it to be meaningful. But I still don't think, unless I just haven't tried out one of these products. And again, we suffer from coming too much from a technical lens on stuff. But I would agree. All that to say, I would agree with your assessment that we're probably at a point where we don't need to sell verifiable credentials, or we don't need to sell privacy or interop benefits. It's kind of just like build a product.
When we talk about what has changed, it's definitely, I said, like there's this big big excitement around AIDAS initiative, and kind of regulation being the most important export product of the EU. There is also kind of a hope that if this gets adopted and in the EU, and if this gets successful, that somehow it will spill over to different regions, and then you'll have more or less similar success as the EU had, like with GDPR and so on. I'm honestly, when I look at this whole kind of AIDAS, I'm honestly quite supportive of the whole initiative, and I'm really happy to see that it's being progressed. And it's also kind of positive to see that there's a lot of these different discussions around technology standards, different types of standards and so on. But at least there is kind of a push from the regulatory side. Okay, this is going to be the technical stack, and go figure it out, and make sure that it works, and create some make sure that it's interoperable and so on. So at least there is a this is really, really positive and so on. At the same time, I'm kind of a little bit disappointed that that AnonCreds wasn't part of the discussion, or it was kind of left out from being a candidate relatively early. And also, like when you hear the reasons why was that the case, that some of the crypto, the AnonCreds were like too tightly coupled with the crypto. The crypto was not really, it didn't have the crypto agility, that you were not able to change the signature type or the key type, to sign the credentials and so on. But and it's like unproven and not really mature enough. And now we are in a position that we are actually implementing OpenID for VC, or SDJOT kind of implementation of credential format from draft specs. So it's even more immature. So it's even more how to say. We are in a position that we are kind of testing, and that we will be testing this technology with real users quite soon, with libraries, with software that's like really, really I would say immature and unproven and untested. So that's kind of the whole irony, from all of that. But it's it's also a reality. I'm also a little bit kind of say I'm not sad, but a little bit disappointed that somehow the whole Indiano cred community didn't recognize, and I'm including myself, part of that as well, that they didn't recognize, that there was a moment to somehow um, maybe improve those things a little bit earlier. And maybe push this AnonCreds maybe through some kind of a standard track faster than it was, because when you look what's happening with the SDJOT, with OpenID for VP, it's sorry for VC, it's happening. They can go through standard track like quite quickly. They can go through ISO track quite quickly if there is a will to do that. So to me, this is kind of a disappointed that we didn't manage to overcome those that criticism, and that we didn't manage to prove that there's some kind of real value in this. And of course, maybe in some kind of future iteration of AI, we will get to that point. But right now it is what it is. But I'm still, I said, like quite supportive, quite positive. I'm still, happy that this is really going to be that we are actually going to see, these verifiable credentials in the wild. So I think all of that is quite positive.
Yeah, I think I commend the effort of the AnonCreds community and folks that have implemented that to stick behind unlinkability. I think that's a big thing that I was actually thinking of writing a paper on that. Just unlinkability is just a broader topic, but yeah, I echo your thoughts. And then at the same time, it's just the fact that the EU is doing something, and they've decided to do it, and they're putting efforts, and they've made some decisions, and we could talk about those decisions all day, but at the same time, the fact that they've decided to do something and not just keep waiting and thinking and about different options or what they could do, I guess they need to be commended for that too. So these things will continue to evolve, and I agree with all of your points, but I guess like you said, it's nice that we're going to start to see more verifiable credentials in the wild, which is something in 2017 when you were at Evernym, which seemed only a few years away, but we're getting there. Yeah, thanks, Vlad, for doing this. I really appreciate your time and the chat. It was awesome. Look forward to doing it again.
No, thank you, Matthew. I really enjoyed that. And yes, let's do this again, after some time. Then we'll see, really if some of our predictions are really, coming to life.